Hello and welcome back to the channel. It's Mark from PowerSonic and Apprentice 1-to-1. Today we are installing a CPFuseBox consumer unit, dual row, for a bit of added extra excitement. We are also installing an EV Hypervolt charge point. Matthew and Nathan are going to be getting on with that one. I'm repping the Monday Club top today. Sam sent me one of these over very kindly as one of the hosts on Monday Club on occasion. Obviously there's the whole crew of people who go on there. I'm not going to start naming them because there's way too many. It's a fantastic podcast. If you've not checked it out already, go and get subscribed. Links up here. Sam drops out awesome content every single week, and I'll certainly be listening today as well because there's just been a drop this morning. But before we get on with anything out on site, I'm going to take you through some of the materials in the office. We're going to talk through some of the instructions, some of the stuff that you might need to be aware of when you come to install these things. Just because I know lots of you find that interesting from the comments and messages I get sent back. If you prefer to just see the installation work, zoom along a little bit. There'll be a time lapse most likely. I'll chat through what we've done, and yeah, let's get on with it. The number tags are these. Now you'll see in some of my other videos, sometimes I loosely wrap them round and just pin them together so they're stuck with a longer display tag. Other times I wrap them around like this. There's really no rhyme or reason for why I do or don't do that. Sometimes I'm just trying to make them a little bit more obvious when you're in a tight corner, for example, so there's a little bit more of the label on show, so you've got a better understanding of what it's actually saying to you, whereas when it's straight in front of your face, making it neater by utilising the wraparound method. You know, it's just what I do. There's probably no logic to that at all, but that's how I've always done it. This is the little orange spool in there. You'll see all the numbers. It is a simple case of you just wind your tape out and then cut it off with the little blades that are in there. Got the old Klein driver. That's the spinny around one. I don't know if you've seen that before, but that flips about. And been using the Weir crimper or ferrule end crimping kit, and that was just on these stranded cables that I've used to join the doorbell to the RCBA. Point of note with these, if you are bringing cables into the consumer unit on the DC side of the doorbell and you are going to have them inside the consumer unit without any outer insulation, you need to make sure they're rated for an application up to the voltage of the consumer unit as a whole. Now you can simply do that by using some twin and earth cable, for example, or otherwise make sure you're using a flexible cable with the right rating. People often make the mistake of just bringing bell wire or something straight in to these, and whilst you can route the cables well out the way of anything, and it's unlikely to ever be an issue, you know, strictly speaking, it's not how it should be done. So we'll try and ensure we do that right on this one. Otherwise, yeah, not a lot else to say about that too much. I've got the instructions here. It's always interesting to have a look at these. So you'll note there for the SPD, it's telling you it's got its nominal discharge of 20 kA and its max of 40 kA, and that it does need to have the overcurrent protection, which this all comes pre-wired anyway with the tails gland and the SPD all wired. So that's nice. And again, in the instructions for the consumer unit as a whole, one of the things to draw attention to that people often get confused about is the ambient temperature. So MCBs are all calibrated at 30 degrees, and that's to do with the product standard. So that'll be your 60898 product standard. And if you are in an environment that is 60 degrees, you would adjust to 0.85 as a derating factor, 20 degrees 1.0, and 0 degrees 1.15. I've spoke about this before. It's very, very rarely an issue in a domestic environment because these are talking about the ambient temperatures, not the spot temperatures on the actual products themselves, the ambient temperature of the consumer unit as a whole. There's been some misleading videos shared on YouTube by other people that have kind of led to that confusion. Really, it's if you're ever going to use these in a colder environment that, you know, I would be more concerned, and really they're not applicable for use in those places. So if you've got them in an unheated shed, for example, that's something that you might want to consider, because, you know, you can be on the side of danger rather than something that's nuisance. Well, there's no such thing as nuisance tripping, but something that's a bit more sensitive to operation, which it would be in a warmer environment. Where a colder environment, you've got the potential to overload the cables because the protective devices aren't operating as quickly as they otherwise would. One of the things that is a consideration is due to the magnetic effect, so that's the adjacent thermal magnetic effect. If you've got circuits in and around each other where they're going to be consistently, and again the key word is consistently, and continuously running at a nominal rated current, then you're going to have to derate them as well. I mean, you might have that if you've got storage heater circuits, for example, where they might be on for a considerable amount of time and they could be stacked up next to each other. But if, for example, you've got a cooker circuit and a socket ring final circuit, it's unlikely they're going to be under considerable load next to each other for a prolonged period. Unless kind of that doomsday scenario happens where the main heating to the house has gone and people are plugging in electric heaters around the place. So it is worth keeping in your mind, but as I said, in the domestic environment it's unlikely to ever be a problem. Whoops, the Hypervolt is here, so we've got the linear super clips as well, just stocked up on those. I've also got some of these tower clips. These are just nailing ones which fit nicely as well with the EV Ultra cables, so you can, if you wish, clip, but where we can, we use these because they look a lot nicer. I think on the last Hypervolt video I shared, we wasn't able to because of it was a really rough surface, so it wasn't easy to get the super clip fixings into the mortar line. It was a bit soft, so we ended up going for a more traditional concrete screw and cleat. But Hypervolt's there, slightly different one because it is a 7.5 meter lead on this one. People tend to opt for the 5 meters, but you see on the box there, it is a 7.5 meter, so it's a little bit longer. Okay, so a bit of fun there of me falling off my steps. That's just a little clip from later on in the video. I might have cut it out later on actually, but you know, it's one of those, if you're putting your steps on a slippy laminate floor, an old timer like me should know there's every probability you might end up on your backside. Just wasn't thinking. It's a really awkward cupboard again to get in. There's shelves in the way, so I couldn't get the steps in. And yeah, I should have made a bit of effort securing them more properly. But anyway, you can see me stripping out these boards. I'm going to take a bit more time over this because I realised on the last consumer unit video I did, I was in the way of most of that. And a few people asked questions how I strip out, mark out the cables and stuff. So I thought we'd go into that on this one. And you can see there I'm just transferring the number off the front of the push-in MCBs that someone's upgraded these old fuse wire boards to in the past, to make sure they're on the carriers themselves. So when I come to mark up the wiring later on, I know exactly what everything is, and that'll transfer over onto the cables. We're fortunate that we do have a circuit chart layout on this install that's pretty accurate. We'll speak about that a little bit later on as well as we come to put the boards back together. But you can see me here just marking up those carriers again, taking the MCBs out. We'll get this sped up a little bit because it's quite repetitive, and we don't need to sit through hours of footage of me doing strip outs. But there you can see me transferring again the numbers onto the carriers themselves, getting the covers off these old boards. That was Matthew nearly poking me in the eye with a Hypervolt supply cable. He'd popped through the wall with no warning. We've got these little expansion boxes on the bottom. These are quite common on larger old domestic installs. I've seen a few of them, might be new to some other people, but basically it was an easier way of adding extra circuits in to an install without having to replace the consumer units or add brand new ones. They just link off the bottom bus bar, so they have the little screw terminals on the fuse carriers. If you can see that thicker red wire on the middle board, it just loops off that bus bar into the expansion boxes and they loop between each other. We do have a point of isolation away from here, which has been carried out. We'll talk a little bit about the stuff on the left hand side of the screen, so that switch fuse and the RCD at the top in a short while. But I'm just disconnecting all these tails because we've got new cables to run in for our new fuse box. You'll have noticed I transferred the markings over from the fuse carriers onto all of the cables a minute ago, and I'm just taking the earth block out here. We're going to put a new one of those in as well. The doorbell transformer's coming out. The customer has now got a wireless battery operated doorbell. So that one you saw me fitting earlier on in the video, we don't actually need. So that can come out, so I wasted my time and energy on that, but you know, I was trying to pre-populate and plan this job as best as possible. So you can see here we're just getting the doorbell out, get that out of the way, all of the old cabling. Start to strip out of these boards now. So again, it's important, you see I just take a quick picture there, so I've got a fighting chance of knowing what's what if I do make a mistake and misplace a cable. If you know what you've got at the beginning, it always helps. So stripping these expansion boards out, making sure I'm transferring the markings onto the sheaths if they're long enough. You know, the more marking the better, you're less likely to lose something or get something mixed up, which will save you time at the end of the job. So you can see here I'm just cutting off the old tails, making sure these boards are coming out, cables are straightened and marked, It looks like I've got quite a bit of length here, but the holes coming through that ply board don't line up very nicely with the holes into the back of the dual row CPFuseBox, so they aren't quite as long as they appear. And you can see here again, just back in the cupboard to mark these up on the sheath, pull out any extra length that I can, and get it as neat and tidy ready for the refit phase. You can see I'm stripping out this top board again now. Similar process, make sure you cut the cables off nice and flush so you are working with new fresh ends on your consumer unit. Don't use the existing ends, you know, take a fresh cut every time. You see I have to pass on the markings again where I can, pull through any extra length if there is any there to be had, and make sure the line markings, so I put all the marks on the red line conductor at the start are transferred to the sheaths if possible. And just get the earths out the way there as well. Take the old clips out the board, any of the old tails out the way because we don't need those, and get all the cables through into the right place. Just to speak about that install, on the left hand side you'll see the switch fuse, which is for a heat pump, and also a 40 amp RCD circuit which goes off to a stable block. Now we're lucky that the owner has arranged for the DNO to fit an extra supply onto their install because it is a big property, so the heat pump and the stable block are now on a different supply to the house and the EV charge point. Obviously with a Hypervolt EV charge point we can use load limiting, so it was never going to be a factor. It could take out a main fuse, but obviously the customer wants to be able to charge the vehicle in a quick time. It is a full electric vehicle, so they've gone to that process of making sure they have that in place. So that's why we need to drop new tails through to our outside supply, and then we can allow the older stuff to be popped onto the existing supply. And you can just see Matthew here cutting out that backboard for us with his Milwaukee M18 oscillating saw. And yeah, he's popped in the cupboard for a minute because I nipped out for a quick drink and stretch of the legs, and you can see me leant back in the cupboard again now, just getting these straightened out, joined together in a neat and tidy way to pop into the new board. You'll see me dropping that on the wall in a minute. So there's one cable that dropped out the ceiling, and that's going to enter through a gland into the top of the board. I was considering taking it into the wall surface and around the back of the board, but because I know we're going to be rewiring this shortly anyway, I didn't see the point, so we just used a stuffing gland on the top there and brought the cable in. And again, I'm using just a single entry point on one side of this board. It would have been easy to split them across the two holes and dress it in more neatly, but now the other side of that board I can use for any new circuits as we drop those in, and we're not going to be interfering with any of the existing stuff. That's why we've got a few spare ways as well. So you can see here I'm just starting to get the tails nicely in on the gland, make sure they're all secure, and again using the cable clamp, that's a nice feature from FuseBox, so we know those tails are held nice and securely, less likely to work loose due to any vibration, and hopefully help us prevent any loose connections. Again, just getting that sorted out, making sure it's tightened up enough for now, and we'll torque all those down later on. So I was in two minds of which of these two boards to start on. I was going to do this bottom one because it was easier to stand in front of and work on, but I did decide I would do the top one first. But to begin with, I'm just going to strip all these back, make sure all the old earth sleeving's off, get the fresh earth sleeving onto the cables, and again just mark these up. So we decided to go for a flag marks with the label printer, just because they're a bit more noticeable than the little wraparound markings. There's that much cabling going on in there. I was trying to make it as simple as possible for us to work on. So we've gone for the little flag wraparound marks, and we've just numbered them in relation to the old circuit chart we had. And again, yeah, just using the earth sleeving to pop that over there, make sure it's all freshly sleeved and the ends doubled over where needed, ready for final dressing. Just working through there. Just to speak of the existing wiring, the actual test values we got were pretty good. There's been really good division of circuits on this original install. It's been done to quite a high standard, and it's been maintained quite well. So I mean, although the wiring is of an age where a rewire is going to be wise, it's not actually unsafe, and it's providing good test results, so it's perfectly serviceable to drop onto these RCBOs. And yeah, the customer's got a safer install to work with as the upgrade works carried out. So again, you can see here, just repeating that process on the top board now. So we get all the cables straightened off, positioned in a way that is safe and sensible. I've got Matthew roped in here again, probably while I've popped out to take a phone call or two. He's already got the Hypervolt done and on the wall. There's no messing about with them. And yeah, rather than send him off to another job, I thought they could help me out and finish this one off. So he's hopped in the cupboard there just to strip and mark up these cables for me and pop the earth sleeving on. Plus he wants to be YouTube famous, so he's got to appear in the odd video here and there. But that really isn't true for anyone who is watching this, by the way. Matthew is not that keen on being on YouTube. So yeah, we can see here he is slowly but surely working away through these cables, making a good job of things there. Getting the sleeving on, making sure all the tags are on so we know what cables are for what circuit. So again, these flags don't bear any semblance to the circuit order that they're going to be in the new consumer unit, so they will need cutting off and removing, but it just helps us in the time being know what circuit does what. So you can see again there, he's just getting the air sleeving on, getting everything nicely set up, ready to dress these away. And then he's going to go outside and start working on these tails for the new board supplies that we're going to be utilising. So he's gone outside. Oh, he's not actually, he's back. He's back. So he's putting some more sleeving on for me in his little TIS bobble hat there, which actually Steve from TIS sent 2 of those hats. I thought I'll have both of them, one for wearing when I walk the dog and one for work, and they've both ended up on Matthew and Nathan's head, and I no longer have a hat. So there we go. So you can see me here getting the main earth dressed in, and again, as I say, we're going to use an earth bar external to the consumer unit for the bonds and main earths. That's just because of the split supplies and the fact we've got a lot going on in this cupboard. I thought it made sense to keep the earthing separate from the consumer units themselves on a separate earth bar, so I've decided to do that. And yeah, we'll get ready with dressing these boards away. I think I do the top one first. Just getting the EV supply cable up into the boards, so you can see we've brought that up there. It is cleated underneath these, and I'll show you that later on in the video actually, but rather than use a gland onto the board, I thought we'd get the cable out of been on display and neatly into here while we had the opportunity. So you can see on this top board now, just starting to split this cabling up. I'll move the camera position and show you that moving along. That cable that came in the stuffing gland at the top, I've dropped that down to the bottom board. So you'll see here a bit more of an idea of me on the steps. That's why I kind of slipped off before. These are kind of pushed in the cupboard on the backwards angle. It's really not how you should use steps, but it was the only way I could get in. And again, just dressing the line of neutrals into each of the RCBOs and popping the CPCs into the earth bar across the top there. You may have noticed that there's a black wire going into the earth bar. That's an old bond on some of the copper pipe work that's under the floor. It was on the old fuse boxes, so we thought we might as well reinstate it. You never know quite where that could be going in terms of any bonding of any of the metal services or anything, so we've popped it back in. It doesn't hurt to have it there. The fly leads for the RCBOs on this one I decided to bring up the back and into the top. Normally I would route these behind the RCBOs, but because all of the cables are entering off the back and we wanted to get the wiring room behind the RCBOs for those, I thought it made it a bit neater. So that's the way I've gone on that one. You see now that top one's all done and dressed away. I've marked onto the front of the RCBOs what each circuit is and removed the numbered tags. This bottom board again, moving the RCBO fly leads and making sure we've got lots of nice wiring room, just getting all these cut to length and dressed away a circuit at a time. On this one, I think from memory we had the lighting circuits at the beginning. There was a bit of shuffling around just to neaten up as best we can the way these cables are dropping into the board. It didn't quite align with how I had it in my mind, just the way that the cables are brought down on the old drops into the old fuse boxes. You've got to work with what you've got at hand, so I'm doing that now, getting the cabling into the RCBOs. And again, these FuseBox RCBOs are single pole switch neutral, so we have that extra feature in there. They do term these as type AC and type A compatible. I think all of the RCBOs are that. It's just CPFuseBox are one of the few manufacturers I've seen state that in the instructions that come with their products. So you can see they're just working away through these, and again we've got some of the taller RCBOs, which is slightly irritating, but that was just a stock issue from the local wholesaler. It wasn't a decision of mine to use those. They are still type A. I don't think those ones are switch neutral though. I think that's the only difference. I could be wrong on that. See, just grabbing a quick coffee there in the cupboard. It was really hot in here actually and sweaty, because you always end up like that in these little cupboards, even on cold days. Just seems to be the way it goes. You can see all the old tails there, so that's the tails going off to that RCD main switch at the top and the switch fuse for the heat pump. And again, we're going to pop a little Henley block on there, a new set of tails through off the new supply into that, and then we've got our tails through outside to the new isolator on our new supply for this board and the EV charge point. And I guess as time moves along, we might either see that as been a solution on our installs. We'll either be seeing 3-phase going in on properties, or they may give us a couple of service heads to work with as we've got extra demand, or we'll see more of this shift to battery storage and local generation. I guess that's the journey we're on at the moment. We'll see how that pans out over time. But on this one, again, you'll see we've got the CT clamp wiring going on there as well. I'm just popping those out of the way. We will put heat shrink over those as well to give them a bit of added protection while we're inside the consumer unit and keep it well away from the actual main wiring within there. That's to help with any EMF interference and also making sure that we're giving them a fighting chance of not getting any live voltages onto them. See, that's the bottom board all dressed away, and that's the top board again. It's not picture perfect, but it's neat enough and serviceable for the next person, which is the main intent. And you see I've cut the flags off most of the cable in there. They're all going to be taken off and relabeled inside the board. You can see Matthew's working away there on the circuit chart, so we've just popped the front on so we can make sure we transfer over as quickly as possible our labels. So this is a view from the bottom of the cupboard, and you can see some of the shelves there I was talking about and the boxing in. That's our EV cable, so that comes through low level. Again, we've got pipe work all over the place in this cupboard, so we had to be a bit careful where we were drilling through, but I think that's quite a neat solution. Cleated along with the nice washers there up this wall, and then we pop into the boxing behind the consumer unit and straight into the back. You can see that we popped our labels on. We've got that all dressed away, nicely sorted out and marked up. All of the testing at this stage is done as well, and the power's been restored for the customer. We've got our Henley block in place for the old heat pump and the stables, and we've got our supply in for the EV and new consumer unit. You see Matthew, we've been working away outside here, and we've got the Hypervolt on the wall. Don't know why that was a blue picture there, but we've got that on the wall there ready and commissioned for the customer. Popped up. This is all actually getting re-rendered at some stage, so that cable could potentially be hidden away. These are just some pictures of the job, so that's the pre-boards, and a lecturer's asked for these, so I'm going to supply those to a college for them to have on a display board. You can see some of the old wiring in there and the tails and the setup that we had, and the strip out. And again, some of these pictures, that's me in my Monday Club top. That's this laminate floor on the hallway that tripped me up and sent me a cropper. Yeah, that's inside the new consumer unit, and again, neat as possible as I could get it, and you know, it's serviceable for testing and maintenance. Not that it's really going to need it, because this is all coming out soon. And then we've got the finished product with the RCBOs in place, and that's just a bit of artistic work of me making a picture look nicer. The van's parked up on the drive. So that was a pretty tricky one, because obviously, as I've said before on other installs with old wiring, you're stuck to set lengths of cables. It could have been easier, it could have been a hell of a lot harder as well. We were fortunate in knowing that the actual wiring itself was in reasonably good order considering its age, and this is just a short-term step while the customer goes through the process of renovating the property and having a rewire. Primary objectives achieved. We now have the EV Hypervolt installed so the customer can charge their electric vehicle up, and we have improved overcurrent circuit protected devices installed on the wider installation. If you have any questions about this, I've talked through some of the reasons and some of the setup we had on that install during the time lapse on the consumer unit. Get in touch, get involved in the comments. I love the debate and discussion. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. There's loads more stuff coming. We've got EV installs, we've got some commercial work as well. I try and share a bit of everything. Might be the odd podcast or two dropping on the channel as well. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.